Good morning. I'm Mark Allen with Gaper.io, and I'm here today with Sacha Thompson, the founder and CEO of the Equity Equation. Good afternoon, Sacha. How you doing?
I'm good, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. So can you share a brief background of yourself and your work experience?
Sure. So my career actually started off in higher education. I have a master's in educational policy planning and leadership. And so started working on college campuses, doing diversity work there, student affairs, residence life, etc. Realized that higher ed was great, but didn't pay very well. Um, and so ended up going to work for the company that owns the GMAT test. So still stayed within education
Mhm.
and did outreach, diversity outreach for them for several years. Um, and oddly enough, got a ping on LinkedIn from someone at Oracle saying, "Hey, I see that you have field marketing experience. Why don't you come over to Oracle?" And I'm like, "I have no tech experience. I can turn my computer on and that's about it."
Mhm.
And so he's like, "Use this time to learn about tech marketing." So I did several years at Oracle, then went to a small startup based in Silicon Valley where they wanted someone to run their East Coast field marketing. So I didn't have to move to Silicon Valley. And then my last stint was at AWS, where I managed inclusion marketing for their global program there and did an diversity outreach program there. And then within the last few months, just started my own company. I'd been doing diversity consulting for a bit and have been adding coaching to that as well. And so that's how the equity equation kind of began.
Oh, very cool. And when you worked at Oracle, did you work in DC or did you work in Silicon Valley?
So I was in the DC area
Okay.
still.
Did you ever come to the Oracle home?
Oh, yes, quite a bit. I know Redwood City, Redwood Shores, that whole Menlo Park area very well.
Well, and just so you know, I live about 2 miles from the Oracle building.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yep. I
And
know that area very well.
I used to live almost across not the street, but the pond, or they call it the slough. Yeah, I know that
Yep.
area very well. So very nice area. So what has been your experience with remote employment, both as an employer and an employee?
As an employee, I think once I transitioned over to tech, it wasn't very difficult. I mean, most of the work that I was doing when we were in the office, quote unquote, in the
Mm,
office, um, because I was in field marketing, we were always on the road.
mm,
And so it was somewhat remote because we just kind of worked wherever we were. So I did spend a lot of the time. That's how I know, that part of California so well, because we were always moving around.
mhm,
When I worked at the startup, one of the reasons why they wanted me and one of the reasons why I loved them was because there were no offices in the DC area.
mm,
And so it was 100% remote.
mm.
And so I was able to set up my home office, years ago to be prepared for a remote work. And then the same when I was at AWS, I was on the road. Like last year, I think it ended up being 80% of the time I was
Ooh,
somewhere around the world, spending at least a week, a month in Seattle.
mm,
So I know Seattle pretty well as well too. Um, so and I had an employee that actually, I was in the DC area. Two of my people that reported to me were in the DC area, and I had one in Seattle. So again, this whole sense of remote was not something that was unfamiliar. So when COVID hit, I was just like, oh, okay.
okay.
Like I just won't go into the office. I could just work from home.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the only thing that I had to do was just get my docking station and monitor
Mhm.
from the office. But pretty much, it was a fairly easy setup.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've worked from home for over 10 years, so it was the same for me. It actually affected my social life much more than my work life.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And since you had people all over, did you ever think of like moving to Kansas City or someone like somewhere like that in the middle of the country?
Nope.
No, you like DC?
Well, it's interesting because I was doing a lot of work with our teams in London.
Mm,
Um, and so what was great was I didn't have to wake up too much earlier to work with them.
yeah.
And then by the time my day started to get going, the West Coast was waking up,
Yeah.
right? So it's a perfect location to be as connected internationally as possible.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the only challenges, were with India,
Yeah.
but even our teams in Cape Town, yeah, it was much easier to connect to them than for them to connect to people in Seattle. So
Yes, I agree. And I know, depending on where you are in the US, like I've had people in Australia well, I'm in San Francisco, and actually there's, I think it's 4 o'clock our time PM or their time is when the other one comes on to work. So it's like, okay, well, just, the end of my day is talking to them.
yeah, exactly.
And they're starting their day but a day, 18 hours ahead, I think it was, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think is the future of remote employment, and what do you think can be done differently to make it more effective?
It's interesting. When COVID hit and everyone was scrambling a bit to go remote,
Hmm.
I thought it was actually a really great thing.
Hmm.
And I say that because I'm in the diversity space, and the one community that has always been yelling for remote options has been the disability community.
Hmm.
And so many companies that had excuses for why they couldn't be remote now had no excuses.
Hmm.
Right now, they're opening themselves up to, oh, we can allow people to work from home. We can provide accommodations. And so I think that that's opening up opportunities to individuals that had often been left out of the workplace,
Hmm.
particularly in tech, where we know the number of jobs are steadily increasing and the number of skilled labor, skilled employees is not going to meet that demand.
Hmm.
So for me, I think that it's a wonderful thing that we're going remote. It also allows companies that are looking for more diverse talent to step outside of their city's bubble,
Hmm.
right? So now people don't have to move. They can live where they want to live. Um, I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who lives in the DC area, and her job, she's just starting a new job, and it's in Charlotte, North
Hmm.
Carolina. And so she's going to move back to Virginia, where we grew up, in her parents' house. And she's like, the cost of living here in Petersburg is nothing, compared to DC. And if I want to move to Charlotte, I can, but I don't have to. And
Yeah.
so it allows a lot more flexibility as well, too, as long as the job is getting done.
Right. I think most people feel that way. And it's interesting here in San Francisco, we're noticing people are leaving the city of San Francisco, but they still like the area. So they're actually moving to the outskirts of San Francisco.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting because before there, when companies put their offices in San Francisco, you had to go live there because of the traffic, or it was just a nightmare. But now it's like, hey,
Yeah.
still, like Twitter's announced they're 100% remote. Microsoft announced it the other day, right? A lot
Yep.
of like people like, well, I can go an hour from here and still get the same weather and all the nice benefits and still,
Yeah. So that social life remains intact, right?
yes,
That people have been lacking lately.
yes, I agree. So what is the story behind the equity equation? Who do you target? I mean, are you for the diverse workforce, or do you help the companies, or both, or
Both.
both?
Yeah. So it really came about actually when I was working for the startup in Silicon Valley. That's where the idea kind of percolated, because it was a company that didn't have any diversity, anything at that point. I was employee number 36. I was the first Black female employee that had hired. And so there were some struggles. There were honestly
Mhm.
struggles on both sides. And so what I ended up doing was really making a connection with our CTO and CEO, and helping them build their diversity strategy, helping them put together employee resource groups, and how are we going to define them, and what's the process to become an ERG. And so through that process, what I learned was there's a lot of people, particularly like white leadership, that have great intentions. They're just not quite sure what to do.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of fear of doing the wrong thing. And so, excuse me,
Mm.
a lot of the folks that I work with is that population, right? And helping them get past those fears, because any decision that's made at a company is made by individuals.
Mhm.
And so you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing for the right reasons, and making sure that it's sustainable. The second part of that is I do work with people that are from marginalized communities that are struggling a bit. They're hitting ceilings. They're not quite sure what to do. They have a manager that they're not quite sure the communication's not there. And they're not quite sure why. And so working with them to kind of dig a little deeper into that, ask the right questions, but prepare them to ask the right questions. Right now, what's happening is there are a lot of tough conversations that need to take place. And no one's really equipped to do that. And so that's the work that I do on the coaching side. The consulting side is I partner with several different diversity consultants as well. And so it just depends on what the customer needs and wants. So it could be anything from trainings to workshops to difficult conversations, panel discussions, you name it.
Very interesting. And so, I mean, I'm assuming you're a solopreneur, right? Do you have staff?
It's just me, myself, and I.
Wow. So the buck stops here, right?
That's it. Yes.
So you by nature are a remote employee, I guess, or do you live at work or do you work from home? Which one?
I know. So I learned again from that startup. I have an office in my house. And so at the end of the day, this door gets closed, the lights go off, and I live my life.
Well,
right.
That's
so
good.
So I've kind of created these mental office hours. And also the same vein, I don't go up to the bedroom. The only other place I go kind of is like the kitchen for lunch or breakfast.
Wow.
So I'm pretty disciplined in that.
So you truly work from home. You don't live at work.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
There's a slight difference there.
There's a slight difference. Yep. So it's like get dressed, take a shower, get dressed, go to work. At the end of the day, shut it down.
Yes, I agree. So it's interesting. You started the equity equation in the middle of a pandemic, correct?
Yes.
And I'm assuming you didn't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to start a company. You've been planning this all along for a while, I would assume, right? So did the pandemic throw any curveballs at you that like while you're doing this that you didn't expect?
Yes. I actually had planned to do this earlier in the year. So like February timeframe. And so I had actually signed a contract to consult with another company and was ready to turn in my, 2 weeks notice. COVID hit and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I don't know if this is the right time to do this. And so decided, okay, like this isn't the right time. Let me use this time to start some of the behind the scenes things that I will need to do anyway. So I did that. But then with everything happening in June and July, racial unrest, and I just felt that it was the time to step out and do that. And honestly, my goal was to launch my business in November.
Of last year or this year?
Of this year.
Okay.
Right. So I kind of said, okay, I'll wait till I want to take some time off, launch in November. But I literally did a soft launch about a month and a half ago. And my phone has been ringing off the hook ever since.
Well, that's great.
Yeah. So I'm like, I haven't even officially launched. I have like a landing page for my website because we were still building the website. But yeah, it's been amazing. It honestly has been amazing. And with it being remote, everything is through Zoom. Yeah. Everything, is right there. And I'm working globally. So it's truly been a blessing.
Wow. And are you at the stage yet where you're thinking of hiring your first employee or not?
Not quite. It's funny. I have a cousin that's also a consultant about virtual assistants. I'm like, I think I might need to get a virtual assistant at some point. But yeah, I'm starting to think about it. It's probably not in the immediate future, but just the way things are going and some of the programs and projects that I'm being pulled into, it'll definitely need to scale very quickly.
Well, that's a testament to your quality of work, because I don't know too many companies that had, solopreneurs that after a month and a half are actually thinking about hiring someone and a virtual assistant. So you must be doing something right.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out what that is, but
Yeah, could you box it and sell it once you figure it out?
Exactly. That'll be my second business. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, Sasha, I want to thank you for your time today. This has been very enlightening, and I wish you luck. Hopefully, maybe you'll come back to the Bay Area. We can get together and have a coffee or something.
Of course. Yes. Love it.
This area, we've probably been to some of the same places.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, have a great day.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Bye.